Sup, boys? So should you even build Rosaria? I had a comment a little while ago that was saying that you realize that Rosaria is just a worse version of Kaeya, and you probably aren't going to level her up past level 20. So that got me thinking, what do the numbers actually look like? If you've been around the channel for a while, you know that I'm an avid fan of the spreadsheets. So what I did is I went ahead and made a spreadsheet for both Kaeya and Rosaria, just literally taking into account nothing more than what comes on the character. So this doesn't include any kind of weapons, weapon bonuses, weapon passives, artifacts, artifact substats, anything like that. It just takes into account the actual character. For instance, it's only taking into account this stat block right here. It does not take into account anything else. It just takes our base attack, the bonus stat that each character gets from ascending. I'm not even gonna go over crit rate, crit damage, because it doesn't really even factor in. So here we have Kaeya. You can see that we have 3 notable levels that I think most people are going to either sort of invest in their character, heavily invest in their character, or max their character out. So at A4, this is level 60 ascended. This just means you're at level 60 and you have hit that ascend button. Level 80 and at level 90, which is fully maxed out. And then we also take our talent levels for each of the corresponding ascensions. At A4, you should be able to get to level 6. At level 80, you should be able to get to level 8. And at level 90, you should be able to get to level 10. So then what we do is we take all of our percentages from each of our hits and we take into account the percentages. We do that for our normal attack, our elemental skill, and our elemental burst, and then we just do the math to get a raw damage number. This doesn't take into account any of the leveling, the defense, the resistances, anything like that. This is just completely raw damage, okay? So as you can see here, we do 122.6 damage, so more than likely in game, that's going to get rounded up. So you can kind of see here how all of these numbers kind of translate from the percentages versus the attack that comes with the character, and we basically did everything the exact same with Rosaria. Now, one of the more interesting things about Rosaria and Kaeya are the immense similarities between the two. So we hop back here to Honey Impact. If we actually take a look, okay, besides the fact they're both cryo characters, one uses a sword, one uses a polearm, whoop-de-doo. But if we take a look at like our elemental skill here, for instance, it's just a 1 hit on Kaeya, but it's a 6-second cooldown. It is technically a 2 hit for Rosaria, but also a 6-second cooldown. Our elemental burst is just a single damage, which the damage actually occurs every time an ice sickle from the glacial waltz actually collides with an enemy. Cooldown of 15 seconds, duration of 8 seconds. If we look here at Rosaria, it does have a skill damage, which is just 2 big hits right before the damage over time comes in, but it is also a 15-second cooldown, 8-second duration. They both cost 60 energy. It's insane how similar these two characters are. Now, because neither of their ascension passives factor into raw damage, Rosaria, for instance, does account for crit, but I'm not even taking into account the crit rate here, just actually because it kind of one-sided blows Kaeya out of the water, spoiler alert. And I'm also taking into account just C0 because I have both characters at C0 and it's the easiest way to test it. And also, if you're just a regular free-to-play player, you're probably not going to have too many constellations on either of these two. But let's say you have, Kaeya at C4 and you only have Rosaria at C0, maybe it's more worth it for you to invest in Kaeya. That situation is going to be totally different for you. So let's take a look at the general summary here. So this is going to be zoomed in quite a bit and it's going to be kind of hard to see, so I'm hoping this is okay. I am also going to share the spreadsheet. You guys can view it down in the description. I'll leave all that there just in case you want to double check my math, because sometimes I am a dummy. So here we have our normal attack. We're just going to do Kaeya at level 6 versus Rosaria at level 6 on each individual hit plus our full combo. And then we do have our charged attack, plunging low and plunging high damage. And you can see I highlighted in green whichever side ends up winning. So as you can see, Rosaria wins everything in level 6s, everything in level 8s, and everything in level 10s. She literally just does more damage. Honestly, I think that a lot of this comes from the fact that her attack is boosted by her ascension. So as she ascends up, she is going to be getting more attack, which automatically just makes her better at a base character level. Next, let's take a look at our elemental skill. So with Rosaria, she does have a 2 hit on her elemental skill. I just added added those together because that's the way that the game applies them. It's just 2 hits back to back. They're not multiplied or anything like that. It's literally just bam, bam. So we're just adding those together. And as you can see, total output damage at level 6 is just going to be, you know, bam, 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 bam. Yeah, Rosaria wins it. Now remember, this is level 6 talents at 60 out of 70, at level 80, and at level 90. Don't want you to forget that. And then we look at our elemental skills. Oh, rip. And we're going to look at our elemental burst. Yep, see, this is why I have to share this stuff, because sometimes I just forget weird things. All right, so our elemental burst, this one was a little bit more complicated, and I had to do a little bit more work to actually figure this out. So if we actually take a look at this footage here, I recorded some footage of both characters doing their elemental bursts, and I timed the ticks in between the damage. So if we actually just fast forward here, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna set a timer, basically a frame counter. So on the left, you can see right here, we're gonna have a frame counter for Rosaria, and then once I start counting for Kaeya, we're going to have one on the right hand side. Eventually, we're going to start tacking the frames that are notable, which is the amount of frames in between each damage, up above the frame counter. Both of these bursts are 8 seconds, so kind of keep that in mind. Rosaria's is not going to hit nearly as many times, and like I've already spoken on, Kaeya's, it hits every time one of those icicle things hits an enemy. So you can see we're counting the frames on Rosaria. We start counting the frames on Kaeya here. Kaeya, so this is the animation of Kaeya's that I took as the beginning or the split of the frames. So you can see when this actual animation pops up on the enemy, that's when I tick for a frame of damage. And then on Rosaria's, we'll skip ahead here, you'll see that the frozen is just barely visible and this cloud starts to come out. You can see that's 1 frame in between those two. When that cloud starts to come out of the spear, that's when I note a tick. Counting. You can see here on both sides. So on Rosaria, it was a pretty even split of 118, so 118 frames in between 2 different points of damage. So on average, 118 frames passed before the next set of damage would roll out. On Kaeya's, you can see it's a little bit more chaotic over here. So 46 frames between the first and the second piece of damage, 37 between the next two, 42 between the next two, 40, 41, 41, and so on and so on. So what this ends up meaning is that after you factor in all the math, there's basically 2 seconds ticks between Rosaria's. 8-second duration means there's 4 total ticks there. There's about 0.7 seconds, or it's like 41 frames on average between ticks of Kaeya's. Now Kaeya's is pretty interesting because it really will depend on where you are. If you are like hugged up to an enemy, obviously they're gonna take most of the ticks, but if you are getting knocked around or moving around too much and you come like outside of the range of the elemental burst, you're gonna lose some damage there. Doing the math on that, 8-second durations means roughly 11 ticks. It was like 11.7, so I'm not sure if you could maximize that by getting 12 ticks. We'll show you the math on if you can, what that affects. But also remember that Kaeya does have a constellation which increases this to 4, and that's not going to take into account that. Okay, this is just C0 calculations. So then let's hop back over here, and you can see these are our numbers from this, you know, right here, the skill damage and this skill damage plus our damage over time. Kaeya's, of course, doesn't have a skill damage. Technically, it's just damage over time every time it hits. So every tick of damage that you get, he has 11 ticks for a total of this much damage at level 6 at 60 out of 70. Rosaria has the 2 hits before her elemental burst starts doing damage over time, so that's what this is, plus the damage over time at 4 ticks is that. And as you can see, it's more damage for Rosaria in every single case. So then that got me thinking, well, what kind of weapon situations are we looking at? Honestly, I have higher tier pole arms than I do have higher tier swords. For whatever reason, I don't have any 5-star swords, and the only 5-star polearm that I use is Staff of Homa, but I just have higher level pole arms, so forgive me if I'm a little bit biased here just because of like hands-on experience. I feel like the pole arms have the swords beat in general. There are some really good swords, don't get me wrong. One thing that I would like to point out is that if you end up having a Keto, there is nothing in terms of a polearm that kind of like is on the same level as Aquila Favonia in terms of like straight up raw physical damage. If you're going for a physical build, boom, you know, Aquila Favonia, if you have that, Kaeya, in my opinion, seems like it would be pretty much the direction to go. If you have, you know, any of the 5-star polearms, of course, you know, Rosaria's already proven just based off of base character that if you add a 5-star weapon on top of that, it's just going to be amazing. The only saving grace for Kaeya is the fact that oh, you guys are gonna hate me on this. I think the only saving grace for Kaeya is that he can be used with Rosaria. It's not that you should necessarily use Rosaria over Kaeya, but Rosaria should be the character that you invest more into if you are going to choose between the two of them. There's been resin math done and like the efficiency of like getting your characters up to level 90 and like what order you should do that stuff in. Hyper investing in a character, getting them to level 90, level 80, whatever your current like goal is for that character, level 80 or level 90. I think Rosaria is going to pay off more in the long run for you, but I don't think that Kaeya is necessarily like worthless. You basically can swap between Kaeya and Rosaria and do like the same exact thing between the two of them and have a really solid just back and forth between the two characters. But that's another video for another day. I think the only reason that you should invest in Kaeya over Rosaria is A, do you have more constellations on Kaeya? Maybe it's worth investing more in Kaeya for you. Do you have higher rarity swords than you do in polearms? Probably more worthwhile to invest in Kaeya. But if you are starting from scratch on both characters, I know a lot of people didn't even touch Kaeya because everyone and their mom has said that he is a bad character and you shouldn't build him. He's not bad, he's really not. But if you're starting from ground zero on both characters, if you just pulled Rosaria and you've been thinking, what should I do? I think Rosaria is going to pay off more, but Kaeya also is like one of the best supporting characters for Rosaria at the same time. So kind of do with that what you will. I do actually plan on doing a video for team building with Rosaria like we typically do. That's probably going to come out on Friday of this week. And when I do that video, I will definitely make it a point to talk about the synergies between Rosaria and Kaeya to kind of give Kaeya a little bit more praise than some other people like to give him. But yeah, boys, that's pretty much the rambling that I have for today. Hopefully you guys, if you have been questioning this, I don't foresee many people questioning it, but maybe you are. Hopefully this was at least sort of insightful for you and you learned maybe a thing or two. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and head out. I will catch you guys later.